Hey guys, I am sorry I cannot be there with you today, but I am still going to read to you. So today we are reading Tesla's Attic. We technically left off on page, what is that? 67, but we are going to back up to page 65 where the action began and then go from there. So we're going to start at the break in the text right here on page 66, and then I will read from there. So go ahead and turn in your books to page 66. We're going to start at Hell Breaks Loose. Here we go. Hell breaks loose in a variety of ways, just like the varied splatter patterns when certain things hit the fan. On this particular day, the event in question came down at precisely 2:19. It was 7th period, the last period of the day. Nick was struggling to keep up in a world history class that he could swear was about a different world than the one he had been learning about in Florida. The teacher, Mr. Brown, was somewhere between Samaria and Phonetica when the school's loudspeaker came on, blasting at high volume into every classroom. Everyone expected some announcement about buses or sports practice cancellations, but instead a conversation between three people played for everyone to hear. I've been building up the nerve to talk to you all day. You said you shattered that recorder. Nick immediately recognized his own voice in the conversation. But wait a second. Had he actually said that out loud? I lied, but I had a very good reason, which I'm not going to tell you, he heard Caitlin say. That had not been part of the conversation either. How can you be so pretty and so frustrating at the same time? Nick felt himself going red. Now he knew something was really, really wrong. He looked over at Caitlin, who was in his history class, and she glanced at Nick with the kind of panic reserved for random locker checks or an approaching tsunami. Uh-oh, is my territory being threatened? He heard Theo ask. Quick! Act intimidating. To which Caitlin responded, Theo, do you have to get involved? Just check out and think about lunch or something. A few people around the room chuckled. Mercifully, Theo was not in this class with them, but no doubt wherever he was hearing this too. Oh, you're the guy who gave Heisenberg the beef dip, Theo said. I'm glad it wasn't me. I would have peed my pants. More laughter around the room. Now Caitlin just stared forward, as if she were watching it all unfold on the room's smartboard. And then it got juicy. Nick, Caitlin said, you're really cute, but you keep giving me grief. Hey, I've got an idea. Why don't you answer a few questions so I know if you like me as much as I might eventually like you? All I want to know, Nick heard himself say, is if that tape recorder has done anything weird, which is exactly what he had said and exactly what he'd been thinking. Caitlin's response, however, was very different. Quiet. Do you want my so-called friends to find out what I'm up to? That had been the moment when Nick had realized Caitlin was being defensive. Sure enough, he heard himself say, wow, something's wrong. She's really defensive. Hey, hello, I'm still here, Theo then shouted. I know big words like harassment and tolerance. I'll run to the principal if you both keep ignoring me. To which Nick responded, the principal's a moron. Now Nick put his head in his hands, wondering if it was possible for this to get any worse. Across the room, Caitlin seemed frozen in time and space as she heard herself say, I'm uncovering people's secrets to feel better about myself. It's not hurting anybody, so leave me alone. Caitlin, you have no idea how much trouble we might all be in, but you'll probably just say something vague and dismissive to make me go away. Fine, said Caitlin. I'll do my usual trick of saying something vague and dismissive to make you go away. And it was all wrapped up by Theo, who said, I wonder what's for lunch. Mr. Brown attempted to continue his lesson, but who was he kidding? The history class was history. About 10 seconds after the broadcast ended, Caitlin bolted out of the classroom, a hurricane of emotional distress. Nick now knew what her garage sale purchase did, and although he was embarrassed, it was nothing compared to Caitlin's humiliation. People were already congratulating Nick and giving him condolences for openly calling the principal a moron. It further immortalized him at the school, but it really wasn't the kind of notoriety he needed on his second day. When school let out, the buzz in the hallways was all about Caitlin. "Can you believe her?" Nick heard people say, "calling us her so-called friends, trying to get dirt to use against us?" Nick was pretty sure Caitlin hadn't said anything about using it against them, but since the machine stripped away any and all lies, he was sure she had no plans to do so. But that didn't stop people from inserting things between the lines. Theo was in the hallway doing his damage control, trash-talking Caitlin with the hope of deflecting his own embarrassment. Still, kids asked him what other big words he knew. How about periorbital hematoma? Goodness, that was tough. Periorbital hematoma became Theo's standard response, accompanied by a raised fist. It was the technical term for a black eye. Nick had to give him kudos for anticipating the question and Googling the perfect answer before class let out. Nick survived the afternoon exodus without being collared by the principal and went straight to Caitlin's house. Her mother came to the door looking distraught, but she was only a fraction as upset as Caitlin probably was. "She had a bad day," her mother said. "Are you in any of her classes? Could you maybe tell me what happened?" Nick thought it best just to give her a clueless shrug. Caitlin's room was easy to find. It was the one with the sign that said Caitlin's room, made out of broken pieces of found objects. He knocked on the door so quietly it couldn't be heard, so he knocked again. He heard Caitlin moan, "Go away." "Caitlin, it's me, Nick." "In that case, go away even faster." He had never walked into a girl's room uninvited before. In fact, he'd never walked into a girl's room at all. When he turned the knob, it was unlocked, which meant that deep down, Caitlin wanted someone to come in. The curtains were drawn and the lights were off. In the dimness, it looked like there was a headless woman on the bed, but it was just that Caitlin's face was under a pillow. "What part of go away don't you understand?" she asked, her voice muffled by the pillow. "Unless you have information about who played that tape, I don't want you in my room." But since she didn't throw anything at him, Nick stayed, sitting down at the desk chair. "Sorry," he said. "I have no idea." He sat there saying nothing more, feeling horribly awkward, waiting for her to speak again. "You could have warned me about the recorder," she said. "I did," Nick pointed out. "Remember? I mean, when you sold it to me. I didn't know any more about the junk in my attic than you did, so don't blame me." Finally, Caitlin tossed off the pillow and stared at the ceiling. "Why couldn't I have just sprouted wings and flown?" "Excuse me?" "I mean, if something impossible had to happen to me, why couldn't it have been something impossible but great instead of something that would ruin my life?" She sat up. Now that Nick's eyes had adjusted to the dim light, he could see how red her eyes were from crying. "Don't say that," he said softly. "It'll be okay." Finally, she looked at him with a scowl, all of her misery, all of her frustration, finding a target. "What do you know about it? You couldn't possibly know what it feels like to have your life shred to bits in one stupid instant." Nick took a deep breath. "I think I do." Then he told her things he hadn't spoken of since the day his own life had been shredded to bits. "We moved here because our house burned down. It happened in the middle of the night. My dad, my brother, and I got out, but my mom died in the fire. And the thing is," this was the hard part, he had to close his eyes to say it, "I think it was my fault." Then Nick couldn't hold it in anymore. He burst into tears. "I know it was my fault." Nick realized any chance he had with Caitlin was now gone. What girl would be interested in a guy who barges into her bedroom only to burst into tears? If she hadn't thought he was pathetic before, she most certainly did now. He did his best to wipe his eyes, and when he looked up, he saw she was crying too. "I'm such an idiot," she said. "No," Nick said. "I'm the idiot." Caitlin thought for a moment. "I have friends who lost their homes in the wildfires a few years back. Nick remembered hearing about the Colorado Springs fires. If nothing else, he had moved to a sympathetic town. "I was in a fire once," Caitlin offered. "What happened?" "My Easy Bake Oven had a short circuit." "Was it bad?" "Terrible," Caitlin said. "I lost my brownies." She said it with such a straight face that Nick unexpectedly found himself bursting out into laughter. She joined him, and before long their tears, while not forgotten, were at least behind them. "Okay," Caitlin said, "so what happened today isn't the end of the world. But how am I supposed to go back to school after the things everybody heard?" "Here's what I think will happen," Nick told her. "For a while, everyone will go nuts with it. Some of your friends will shun you. People who didn't really like you to begin with will hate you even more." "And this is helping how?" Caitlin asked. Nick held up his hands. "But your true friends will get it, and they'll stick by you. And then after a while, a week, a month, 10 years, Caitlin suggested. Maybe. What happened to you is kind of like a fire, in a way. I saw this thing on TV. They said wildfires have to happen every so often. Brush gets too thick, trees get too dense. You have a hot day and whoosh, when the healthy trees survive. But the healthy trees survive. In fact, there are some seeds that won't even grow until they burn first." Nick shrugged. "So have you lost some friends today?" "Maybe, but they weren't real friends. They were just brush. And the ones who stick by you, the ones who get it, they're the healthy trees." Caitlin thought about it and smiled. "I think you're a pretty healthy tree." "Yeah," said Nick, "a weeping willow." "At least you're still popular," Caitlin answered, and they both groaned and then laughed again. Nick looked over at the tape recorder sitting at the corner of her room. He imagined her running all the way home with it in her arms, a burden too heavy to bear, yet she bore it. "So you really think I'm cute, huh?" "What?" "That's what you said." "No," Caitlin corrected. "That's what I didn't say. And if you don't want me to find a lumberjack to hack you into sawdust, you'll leave it alone." Nick grinned. "All you had to do was ask." Caitlin's ensuing loud ouch brought her mother to the door. "Is everything okay in here?" "Everything's fine," Caitlin said. "I may vomit, but we're fine." "Should I get the Pepto-Bismol?" "Figurative vomit, Mom. God, sometimes you're so literal." Nick prepared to take the recorder, but Caitlin stopped him. "One thing first." Then she rewound the tape to the beginning, hit record, and they sat there in silence as the machine erased everything she had recorded. And sitting there with her in absolute silence, Nick didn't feel awkward at all. Okay, guys, we're going to stop there. Once you have paused this video, I need you to go to Canvas, click on quizzes, and take the quiz that goes with this reading. Remember that you have the book, so if you need to look back at something, you can. I'll see you Monday.